What it do, what it do. This is the Brothers on Books podcast, where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. For the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. I am Jack Allweil, and with me, as always, is my brother Alex Allweil. Al, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm pretty sore, honestly. I played my first game of soccer in probably like 6 months yesterday.
What position did you play?
I was playing right back.
Right back, okay.
I was doing a lot of running.
Yeah.
It was,
okay. Were you getting up the flanks and whipping some balls into the box?
I was getting up the flanks.
Okay.
I think that was the problem, is that I was getting up the flanks.
Okay.
Yeah. So today the book we'll be doing is The Violinist by Sam Kean. So Sam Kean was born in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where he studied physics and English at the University of Minnesota, which is kind of an interesting combination. He currently is a writer for science and nature writing and is often on NPR, and he has written 6 books now. And this is the 3rd book of his that I've read. The other 2 being The Disappearing Spoon and Caesar's Last Breath. The other ones he has also sound sort of interesting. The Tale of the Dueling Neurosurgeons, The Bastard Brigade, and The Ice Pick Surgeon. So I guess I came across Sam Kean by reading his other books, just by actually, honestly, I listened to them when I typed in, I was looking for chemistry books to listen to in lab one day, and The Disappearing Spoon and Caesar's Last Breath were the only 2 that popped up. And I listened to them and I enjoyed them both. I would say his books are, it's science written for, the everyday person, usually told in a story standpoint. So using historical events to sort of explain science, as well as give you how things were discovered, and just sort of a backdrop on a lot of history's greatest scientists. So with that said, I guess, Jack, what did you think of the book?
I thought the book was a little long. I did like the stories. Some of the stories I really liked, but I wasn't super interested in a lot of the details on the DNA, but I guess you kind of need the details. So I guess, well, I hadn't done a lot of this material since like AP Bio, I'd say. And that was like when I was like 15, I think. So it's been a while, but I remember the ACT and G, but that was about it. But it was still going over my head. I'm always like, how does anyone think to, look into stuff that you can't really see? Like, how did that even come to be? Like, it is kind of crazy. Well, what did you think?
Yes. So I definitely enjoyed the other 2 books of his. I read, or I listened to more, but they were much more chemistry based. So a lot more in my field. The biology, the DNA, the stories were interesting. I thought it was interesting stories, but yeah, it was sort of long, and I had in our time frame, I had a hard time getting through it. But his writing's enjoyable, and I think for the most part it's easy to get to. And I definitely feel like even if you don't learn anything about science, you definitely come away learning some stuff about history. Sort of like what you were talking about, like how does anyone think to like look at things you can't see? I mean, the thing that I'm thinking of, he has some of these stories about some of these early biologists and like how on earth they think to do any of these things, or really why you would think to do any of these things is always a mystery to me. And a lot of it to me always comes back to really natural medicine is like, because like a lot of natural medicines or historic medicines are just, grind up plant X, heat it into a sludge, also grind up plant Y, heat that up, and then like eat it. And it's like, who on earth would ever, I can't even envision how I would think to just, eat random plant after heating it or doing God knows what to it to treat an ailment. But they did it, and it helped a lot. So that was a lot of what I was thinking as I was reading this.
What was your favorite story?
My favorite story, sort of odd, was actually he had that story about the Arctic explorers with the polar bears. And he was saying that, so vitamin A, and I hope I'm getting this right.
Yeah, vitamin A. Yeah.
Right. Vitamin A is necessary, and it helps with your vision. I believe it's retinol, which is what vitamin A is, or it's a combination of a lot of things that helps with your vision. I think it's what causes carrots to be orange. But he was then saying that a lot of animals in the Arctic, especially these polar bears, have a huge increase of vitamin A in their livers. And excess vitamin A to humans is toxic. And I don't really remember why he was saying it was toxic or what exactly happened other than you got really sick. But these say it again, Jake.
Well, I remember him describing like it sounded like their skin started falling off.
Yeah.
Or like just brutal. And it sounded like the vitamin A helped with the really cold temperatures, because he was talking about the seals also had tremendous amounts of vitamin A.
They used it, I think, for
blubber,
fat storage, right?
Yeah.
And I think what would happen, let me see if I can remember correctly. So the polar bears would eat the seals, and then the vitamin A would be stored in the polar bear liver. And then these polar bears attacked these explorers who were trying to find the Northeast Passage, not the probably more commonly known Northwest Passage that all the American explorers were looking for, to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, by going the opposite way, trying to connect, Europe to Asia over the top. And when these polar bears by chance attacked, they killed the polar bear and then they ate the liver, and a lot of them got sick. And I guess also unbeknownst to me, I guess a lot of Eskimo and Arctic peoples had these taboos explicitly saying never eat polar bear liver, which was something I had never heard of. And of course, these explorers didn't heed that at all. And of course, they ate the liver and then got really sick, and some of them, I think, died. I believe what he was saying was that the vitamin A excess would become almost like a surfactant, and when you would eat it, it would.
What does that mean? Surfactant? What's that?
It's like soap. So it would dissolve the cell membrane. It would dissolve the cell membrane of your cells, so it would destroy your cells. That's sort of what I remember. I'm not entirely sure if that's totally accurate, but that is what I remember from the book.
He also brought up a couple of animals that I wouldn't have thought, like foxes. I remember foxes were on the list of high vitamin A, because it was so weird. Because like a couple of weeks ago, I saw a random fox, and I was like, when I saw him, I was thinking like, well, if I was in Naked and Afraid, I'd be killing that fox and eating it right now. But now I know not to eat the liver.
Yeah, it was weird. It was all stored in the liver. I mean, usually when I think of, I don't know if you've heard of this, but a lot of times when you think of essentially animals poisoning humans from being eaten. You think I often think of fish with mercury poisoning, explicitly tuna. And there can be a lot of fish for some reason have a high tolerance level to mercury, and I believe they don't, they just store the mercury, they don't destroy it. So a lot of times, that's why a lot of doctors tell pregnant women not to eat tuna fish, I think more than once a month, because the mercury is especially bad for the fetuses. There's a pretty, I'm going to blank on the city's name now, but there's a pretty terrible historical event in Japan where this chemical plant was dumping whatever they were dumping. They were dumping some mercury side product, and it got incorporated into the ecosystem in the local pond. And it ended up resulting in, the mercury ended up resulting going to all the fish. And then the humans would eat the fish, and it resulted in a real lot of mercury poisoning deaths and some horrific birth defects. So that's, that was also something that I was thinking of as I was reading that. Just some more historical sort of worthless information.
Yeah, he kind of talks about how the animals that are higher up in the food chain are a little more resilient because they have to deal with all the toxins from everything
else,
everything below them. So
right.
It's kind of I don't know if that was the same chapter where he talks about how humans weren't really, I guess, capable of eating meat. And then there was like a flip in the genes that allowed us to eat meat, at least that helped us survive short term, but hurt our longevity. And then there was another swap of genes that enabled us to, was it cholesterol? Deal with cholesterol better or something? And then that extended the longevity. I don't quite remember, but
I don't remember that either. That would be interesting. I was sort of, as you were talking, I was thinking back to our discussion with Dr. Jaquish when he was saying how plants were bad. Like he was saying, like, plants have all of these toxins in them to fend off animals from eating them, and how plants cause all this inflammation, which was, I believe that is what he was saying. But that was very different from what I had always sort of heard. Right. And, if you go listen to like vegans, a lot of times they'll talk about how our intestines are too long to eat meat without cooking it. And I sort of thought eating meat sort of started, or we really started doing that with the invention of cooking. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
I guess my favorite story in this book was about another Japanese story, the Japanese man Yamaguchi, who had said that he was the only recorded man to survive both bombs during World War II, both in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, he was from Nagasaki. Sounded like he was working for Mitsubishi. He saw the blast in Hiroshima and was kind of out of it, but still was able to get on a train back to Nagasaki, and then was able to go through that also, but lived till he was like 90 years old. So decades after this blast. So that was an interesting story. It's kind of horrific to hear about what happens to people that are exposed to a nuclear blast.
I mean, it was incredible to hear, because it sounded, definitely from how he was describing it, it sounded like he had some radiation poisoning. Because I think he was talking about the severe burns he had, and I thought he said like his skin was peeling.
Yep.
He definitely mentioned that people that got it really bad, like their fingernails would just like drop off, like slough off.
Yeah.
Is almost hard to imagine that just happening to you.
Yeah. I think it was that Hardcore History podcast where he's reading a journal from a Japanese man or woman and they're talking about how the people that had like long sleeves were so much better off than the people that only had like short sleeves. Because even if your skin is exposed to it, even just a t-shirt would have helped you a lot.
Okay.
But he's talking about how skin is just falling off, people's ears are hanging by their side, and it's just very scary.
Yeah, and then he had some I think biologist or physicist was in there saying that like maybe you know, extreme radiation poisoning could be good because you could propagate like good mutations into the gene pool by chance.
So I guess during that bomb, what is actually, so they were talking about how when you have mutations, it's either causing proteins to stop being produced, or basically they just continuously produce, and that's like that's what like a cancer tumor is, I guess, when it
Yeah,
just doesn't stop making it.
right. So there are a couple things that can happen. You can have mutations that result in no change. So like he said, so you have DNA is coded in pairs of like 3 bases, so A, C, G, and T, and every 3 corresponds to 1 amino acid. So there are 20 amino acids, and you have 64 possible combinations with those 4 letters. So there's some redundancy there, which is biologically good. And when I was reading that, I was thinking back sort of to some of Taleb's stuff where he said like the body is incredibly redundant because you have all these multiple different options. So you can get mutations that result in a flip of a base that results in no change in an amino acid. So that would result in no change of the protein. You could have what's referred to, you could have a 1 amino acid switch, which a lot of times isn't that bad, but potentially could be, where you have 1 base get switched out for another that results in a different amino acid. You could then have the DNA shifted such that you get, it's called a frame shift. So the bases get shifted 1. So everything is then read totally wrong. So you're then just essentially in terms of the body, you would be writing off just sort of gibberish amino acids that would result in no like decent protein. And then you could have sort of what you alluded to. You could either have a stop, like a stop sign, be prematurely put into the gene, so the protein is not finished, or you could have a stop sign taken out. So yeah, so then the gene would always be you would just have a huge protein, and those are both deleterious, very, very bad. Mm-hmm. And you're right, when you have a gene that is just constantly, that is functionally what cancer is. Cancer is just the uncontrolled growth of cells. That's how you have those tumors get so big. So if the thing, you could think of it as like, I think the analogy he uses is like a governor on a car that can stop a car from going so fast. If you take that away, just like if you take it away from a cell, the cell will just continue to grow, even if the stimuluses that it's seeing are saying like don't grow or stop. And that is what results in cancer.
Okay.
So I think with that said, why don't we do our first ad? Pickleball, the greatest sport you've never heard of. Pickleball is the fastest growing leisure sport in the United States. It is a mix between tennis and table tennis. However, don't let the average age of participant in this sport fool you. The game has fierce competition and only the will of a champion can thrive. Go buy some paddles and balls and play pickleball, the greatest sport you've never heard of. So Jack, I gotta ask, have you been playing?
I've been amping up my practice, Al. I've been playing at least twice a week.
There you go.
I even did some pickup yesterday, and I played with an 84-year-old man who was actually quite good, and we beat this other pair 2 games in a row.
Nice. Well, the age,
So
like I say in the ad, don't let the average age of this
that's right.
participant in the sport fool you.
Yeah. So what other, there was some, I mean, he tried to paint a picture showing the household that has the most cats. So this couple had 689 cats, and he was trying to describe, I believe it was addiction, like what genes are kind of associated with that type of behavior, and kind of illustrating. Well, I have a note here. It's like when you mix animal and microbe DNA. I don't really remember exactly.
So what I actually thought that was really interesting. I sort of forgot about that. He was talking about this microbe. I think he called it toxo.
Yeah, it was. Yep. Yep.
And what it does is apparently I don't exactly remember, but it wants to be in the feline gut. So it had these real interesting things associated with it, both in rats and humans. And I think what he was showing, well, first off, addiction, but second off, it had some weird relationship with, I guess, fear. Because I think he was then saying that people that a lot of times are viewed as not having any fear, like those adrenaline junkies, a lot of times have like these toxo infections, like severe toxo infections, where they don't know to be afraid. And then the real interesting one he pointed out was with rats, where rats that have never been, he was saying rats that had never, or mice that had never been exposed to cats, if you expose them to cat urine, they would immediately, they would run away.
Really?
But if you then infected them with especially the male rats, if you infected them with this microbe toxo and then exposed them to the cat urine, they would then like it. So it's like, it's weird to think about. And I think the point he was making is that like people think, humans we have choice, like we can do what we want to do. But he's like I think he was trying to say that, hormones and chemicals that you can't see and can't even know about control your actions a lot more than I think some people would want to acknowledge.
Yeah.
And do you know who Sam Harris is?
No.
Okay. So he's sort of, he's somewhat of I don't really know how to describe him, but I've heard him give a very similar argument that says humans have no free will for that reason. Like we're just governed by, the chemicals in our brain and we don't even realize it.
I mean, that's kind of in our discussion last week, when we're talking about like this duality of control in the Stoicism book, how their argument is that you do control your thoughts. But I would, because when I was reading that, I was kind of thinking, well, some people that are crazy, they would say they don't really control their thoughts. Like it's hot wired, like they're not really in control. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But they're like, I don't know. This book brought up a lot of like ethical things, like the scientists I feel are very, I don't know how I feel. I mean, there's a story of a Russian doctor, or I don't know if it was doctor, but a scientist that was basically impregnating human women with chimpanzee DNA to try to mix like the species without the women knowing.
Yeah. I think he was also doing the opposite, right? He was like strapping down chimp females and trying to impregnate them with
right. But I think the issue he was having there was you needed many chimps, whereas if you used a male chimp, you could just use the one male chimp.
Yeah, I found that story very disturbing.
Yeah. And then I just don't know about like the stuff about studying like people's brains and like digging up the dead to look at their DNA. because it seems like there's a lot of like hypothesizing what killed, Abe Lincoln, what killed Darwin, and they're trying to, like, now that years have passed, go back and tell what killed them. I don't know.
Well,
I just
pretty sure most people agree that Abraham Lincoln was killed by a bullet.
okay, but they were talking about some disease that they think he had. I can't remember now, but they brought up Lincoln, that how he was described, that they thought he might have had something, that it wasn't really diagnosed at the time.
It's oh man.
And then they're cutting up Einstein's brain, putting it on little Petri whatever slides, and kind of debunk the thought like bigger is necessarily better in a brain. They did talk about how like the number of wrinkles you have in your brain is good, and that's what they kind of saw in Einstein. But they also said that someone that started like violin at a very young age would also show those same wrinkles. But Albert Einstein also played violin at like the age of 6. So I guess if you're trying to get your kids strong and smart, start them on the violin.
I think it's really all music, right? Like
maybe
any music.
They specifically said violin though, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That was the first time I had heard of that, but I would think all music is good. But and then there's also, I thought, an ethical thing about, like, if you were able to unlock your genome and you could hear what you might have down the line, would you want to hear that?
Are you asking me personally?
Yeah, you personally.
No.
Yeah, I was going back and forth. I don't know how I feel, like, because we were talking a couple weeks ago also about, like, this idea of living like it's your last day. Well, maybe that would like actually inject some fear into you, and like, oh man, like my time is kind of limited, like, actually.
I think they can do that with, on the same note, I feel like you sort of need to be careful with that. I know with Huntington's disease, which is like a very late stage set disease, it usually takes hold when you're like, it's genetic, but you don't really see it till like, I think you're 35 or 40, which is pretty debilitating. I think they can test for that. I hope I'm not getting that wrong, but I believe they can test for that, or they can test your genome for that to see if you'll have it. But it's like, yeah, like thinking as a 20-year-old, would I want to know if when I'm like 35, my life is essentially going to end or not? It's going to be vastly different, not necessarily end. I don't know if I would want, I don't think I would want to know.
Yeah, on one hand, I think I would want to know, because I think it might put things into perspective a little more. But on the other hand, I don't know. If it got into the wrong hands, it could be used against you potentially.
Yeah.
Because like I don't know how I feel about, like, if insurance companies got a hold of that, and if you wanted to have a life insurance policy and then that person has to pay way more because they're way more likely to die soon. I don't know how I feel about. I don't know.
But on the same note, when you get a insurance policy, don't you have to? You had to get a physical, didn't you?
Yeah.
So how is that really?
But they're not mapping out your genome. They're not mapping out all your DNA. There's a lot of stuff that they can't test for. Right?
Well, couldn't they took a blood sample, didn't they?
They did. I don't think they're allowed to, like, go map my genome though.
Oh, whether or not they're allowed or not. Yeah, I think you're right. But what are they doing with your blood? They're testing it for something.
They're testing it for something. Yeah.
Cholesterol, probably.
Yeah. I guess it's just taking it one step further than what they do.
I guess now that you're saying that, have you ever seen the movie Gattaga? Gattag?
No.
So it's the movie is based upon that idea that you just said, like if people could discriminate against you based on your genome.
Mhm.
So like, and it gets to the point where like humans can be almost perfectly created from their parents, and you can decide like the exact traits you want your kids to have.
Mhm.
And then companies, while technically illegal to discriminate based on your genes, find ways to get trace amounts of your DNA to see, like what your traits are. It's a real good movie. It's I would say one of my probably favorite science movies.
I mean, I guess we're discriminated against. I mean, there's discrimination that goes on by any character. Yeah, because like men pay higher premiums on average than women, and for insurance because they don't live as long, and
Like also
all sorts
partake
of
in
stuff.
more riskier endeavors.
Yeah, car insurance too, right? So we're kind of penalized for our DNA.
Yeah.
Um,
He had that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say he had that interesting story about the Austrian scientist who was taking those pus-filled blankets, trying to, I think, find the white blood cells or something in a castle. You have to give some of these guys credit of like these conditions that they're working in sound absolutely awful, and they just keep doing it, and they seem like they like it.
Love of the game.
I think it's safe to say that I don't have that love of the game, because if I had to work in a freezing castle, working with pus-filled blankets from dying people, I probably would not be doing this. Sorry. Well, I sort of cut you off. What else were you going to say, Jack?
No, that was about it. I mean, the only other that was Casimir, I think you were talking, or Kammerer, the Austrian guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting story. It also sounded like he was kind of I don't know if you remember that he sounded like he was fraudulently changing some of the results, and he ended up committing suicide outside of Vienna because that came to light. But I guess the only other ethical type of question I kind of thought of was like the cloning issue. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about cloning a human being?
I would personally be against it. I could see where a lot of people would be for it, or I could see where a lot of people would be for like maybe storing. Like you could envision like storing someone's DNA, right? And then if something were to happen to them, almost just clone them or rebuild them from that stored information.
Yeah, harvest their organs or something like that,
right?
If you needed.
But
it's
I'm personally against it. I would say.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that still. Yeah. Did you have any other big takeaways or messages or quotes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like this book has, I really did find the story you brought up about the toxo organism with the cats and like sort of, perceived free will. I found that very interesting. I don't think this book is one that has a lot of, I would say, takeaways, just kind of, it's fun stories to read, gives you some perspective on history and how, current thoughts in science came about. He talked about a lot of scientists I didn't know, which was sort of interesting. Broadened my horizons in the field of biology. So yeah, I don't know. What do you have any main takeaways, I guess?
No, it was a good refresher from AP Bio, and near the end of the book, he did put a quote in here that I've heard Chris Noggle say many, many times. And the quote goes like this: "It's not what we don't know that stirs up trouble. It's what we do know that just ain't so."
Oh yeah.
I like that quote.
Yeah, I don't know one of those say that a lot.
Yeah, because it's like always questioning your belief system and kind of, yeah, questioning why you believe what you believe. How do you know you're right instead of just thinking you are right? I like that message.
Oh, he had when he was talking about the guys that did all the genetic work on the flies, I think the scientist was Morgan, who would constantly shift his opinion on like how things were happening. And he made it sound out like people would attack him for this, but he was shifting his opinion based on, the experimental data, which is, I just sort of found it ironic because that's exactly how you should, that's exactly what you should do. If you see data come to light that, sort of shows that your original line of thinking is wrong, you should change your opinion to sort of align your thinking with what your experimental data is showing. I'm assuming you're confident that your experiments are being run properly, but I thought that was kind of, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, it was a different book for us, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, Al, what book are you reading next time for your solo mission?
I'm doing Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh, that would be interesting. And then the book that we're doing together is, well, in 2 weeks will be Shop Class as Soulcraft by Matthew B. Crawford. It's an inquiry into the value of work. So we'll see.
All right. I guess with that said, please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. I'm Alex Allwile, and with me as always is my brother Jack Allwile. And I guess this is us signing off.
Take care.
Have a good one.